Chapter 35, Friend of the Family. The time was now 9:04 a.m, and geography class had just ended. Nick and Connor exchanged a look of mild surprise, silently acknowledging the stark contrast between May's teaching style and their own. Back at their old school, lessons often felt like a chore, delivered by teachers who seemed disillusioned, their spirits worn down by years in a broken system. In contrast, May radiated passion, her genuine enthusiasm for sharing knowledge, creating an atmosphere that was both welcoming and engaging. As the lesson concluded, May, now seated at her desk, announced, "You may now take a 30-minute break. Please be back on time for our next subject, history." The students rose from their modular, sofas-turned desks, making their way out of the living room. May handed back their phones as they passed, trusting them to use the break wisely. Most of them eagerly took the opportunity to stretch their legs or check their messages, except for Anne, who remained behind. She was completely absorbed in the exiled prince, her eyes scanning the memoirs of the late emperor with focused intensity. She knew full well that understanding the text would be essential for the upcoming history lesson. But, more than that, studying had always been her way of taking control of her destiny. May had never pressured her to succeed. Anne's motivation came from within. She was determined to build a future that would lift her, May, and James out of the shadows of their past. James wandered into the kitchen, his stomach rumbling as he searched for something quick to eat. Upon opening the fridge, he was pleasantly surprised to find a neatly wrapped tuna sandwich waiting for him. The mansion's I often arranged the fridge's contents, preparing meals at random using whatever ingredients were available. However, the feature could be disabled if anyone preferred to cook for themselves. Curious and hungry, James grabbed the sandwich and took a bite. The flavour hit instantly. The tuna was perfectly blended with mayonnaise and seasoned with a hint of ground pepper, creating a delightful balance of creaminess and savoury depth. He chewed slowly, appreciating not only the taste, but also the effortless convenience of a well-prepared snack. Meanwhile, Connor had retreated to his room, eager to unwind and dive into a bit of gaming on his Polybius console. He sank into the beanbag chair, turned on the screen, and launched Death Mountain 4, a brutal, fast-paced, fighting game, renowned for its diverse roster of characters and over-the-top finishers that demanded both skill and strategy. Logging in as his online persona, Shadowstrike 23, Connor entered the battlefield as one of the game's more agile brawlers. His fingers moved with practiced ease, each movement precise, as he executed perfectly timed combos, dodged counterattacks, and unleashed devastating special moves. Other players often accused him of cheating, unable to comprehend his consistently flawless 1-versus-1 performances. But Connor knew better. It wasn't hacks or exploits that kept him on top. It was pure focus. When he played, the rest of the world faded away. No distractions, no noise, just him, the screen, and the fight. For Connor, it wasn't just a game. It was a world where he had control, where skill spoke louder than words, and where every victory gave him a quiet, electric thrill. Nick sat alone in his room, the soft hum of the mansion's ventilation, the only sound as he scrolled through news updates on his phone. He was trying to keep up with the aftermath of everything that had unfolded over the last few days. One headline in particular grabbed his attention. It detailed the gruesome fate of the prison warden responsible for overseeing Tom's incarceration. The report stated that the previous night's riot had killed the warden as he attempted to escape the prison. The article recounted how a lone guard who requested anonymity had refused to open the main gate. Upon learning the truth about his superior's dark past as a paedophile, the guard made a conscious decision not to assist him. "I'm under no obligation to help a nonce," he reportedly told journalists, his words carrying a defiant weight. The warden screamed and raged, demanding the gate's opening, but it was already too late. A horde of prisoners, already aware of the leaked revelations, surged forward like a tidal wave of fury. Their chants became cries of vengeance, and in a matter of moments, they tore the man to pieces. No weapons, just bare hands, fueled by righteous anger and years of pent-up hatred. Ironically, the prisoners didn't attempt to escape. Their only goal was to ensure the warden never walked free. The guard, rather than cowering in fear, reportedly felt vindicated. Many inmates thanked him for locking the gate, their faces flushed with grim satisfaction that one of the worst among them had been dealt justice. The article ended by stating that the guard would likely be dismissed for disobeying direct orders and contributing to his superior's death. Still, sources close to him said he had no regrets. "That man hurt children. If I lose my job over this, it's worth it." Nick leaned back in his chair, letting the phone rest on his chest. His mind swirled with the weight of what he'd just read. The leaked conversation between Tom and his gang had indeed sent shockwaves across the city. First, Tom's father was being investigated and risked losing his position at Golden Thread for blackmailing the now-deceased warden. And now, the warden himself was dead, devoured by the very people he once had power over. It was a grim victory, but a victory nonetheless. Nick exhaled slowly. He felt no guilt, only resolve. These were the consequences of truth exposed, of darkness brought into the light. In becoming Zeus, he'd taken a stand not just against street thugs or petty crime, but against systemic rot. Yet he knew the present was only the beginning. The Black Death still operated from the shadows, its agents, like Leonard and Cormac Maguire, moving unchecked. Thanatos remained a looming spectre, untouched, unfazed, unchallenged, but not forever. Nick sat forward again, eyes narrowing as images of these figures flashed across his thoughts, like wanted posters. There was work to be done. Injustice didn't end with one corrupt man torn apart in a prison yard. That had only set the tone for what was to come. His fist tightened slightly. The world was changing, and he intended to shape that change. One mission at a time, one lie exposed at a time, one monster brought to justice at any cost. At precisely 9:18 a.m., the melodic chime of the mansion's front doorbell echoed through the halls like a gentle ripple in a still pond. Its tone was elegant and composed, a sound befitting a house of such grandeur. But it struck Nick's ears like a sudden alarm, cutting through the quiet of his thoughts with perfect clarity. He had been perched at the edge of his bed, fiddling absent-mindedly with the hem of his sleeve. still half lost in the memory of this morning's classroom ritual. But the chime snapped him back into the present. His room, tucked just beside the upper landing of the sweeping staircase, offered a prime view of the corridor below. He stood silently and crept to the door, easing it open just enough to see out. From the crack, he spotted the unmistakable blur of May's silhouette, gliding swiftly across the marble floor, her heels clicking in confident rhythm. Her stride was composed, but Nick could detect the faint change in her posture. Just enough tension in her shoulders to suggest she wasn't expecting company. Peering through the shadows, Nick's curiosity stirred. Apollo was silent for once, as if even the AI sensed that something unusual had just entered the equation. A beat later, May reached the front foyer and stopped before the grand double doors, her hand hovering over the antique bronze handle. She gave a brief breath, straightened her blouse, and pulled open the door with a slow, deliberate motion. The quiet morning air swept in like an old song, crisp, cool, and scented faintly of lavender and wet stone. But it was the visitor who truly swept in, like a gust of theatre crashing into a still scene. Framed perfectly in the doorway stood a woman who might have stepped off the pages of a high-fashion editorial. Tall and statuesque, she carried herself with the kind of effortless grace that demanded attention but never begged for it. She didn't walk, she arrived. Her sleek platinum bob cut glistened under the rising sun, each strand perfectly in place as if sculpted by the wind itself. Her face, sharp and luminous, bore the craftsmanship of both genetics and excellent skincare. Her bold, green eyes sparkled under expertly applied emerald eyeshadow, which was lined in soft gold that caught the light every time she blinked. Her lipstick was a vivid, unapologetic pink, neither loud nor desperate, but defiant in its joy. She wore a long, flowing crimson coat, tailored perfectly at the waist, which billowed ever so slightly in the breeze. Beneath it, a moss-green silk blouse dipped open at the collar, revealing a tasteful hint of cleavage, framed by the subtle shimmer of gold-threaded embroidery. The blouse met a pair of high-waisted black leather shorts that gleamed under the morning sun, catching May's eye with their unapologetic boldness. Fishnet tights led the eye downward to knee-high black boots, polished to a mirror finish, with modest but purposeful heels. Every detail was intentional, from the lotus flower earrings dancing beneath her bob to the slim black choker that embraced her neck, with the quiet confidence of a woman who knew exactly how to be seen. In her right hand, she held the handle of a glossy red suitcase, the wheels humming softly as she rolled it inside without waiting for permission. It was clear she hadn't come to ask. She'd come because... May blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by the woman's vibrant presence. It was like standing face to face with a typhoon in a ball gown, impossible to ignore, difficult to anticipate. The kind of person who left glitter in the air long after they'd gone. "Good morning," the woman said, brightly, her southeast English accent as smooth and velvety as a late-night jazz record. Every word she spoke felt dipped in theatre, charming in a way that seemed both sincere and effortlessly rehearsed. "Is Nick Adams here?" May's brow rose, gracefully but pointedly, her lips curled into a polite smile that masked caution with courtesy. "And you are?" The woman beamed, flashing a perfect row of teeth that somehow made her even more disarming. Pankhurst. Susan Pankhurst. Nick, who had been watching with growing disbelief from the crack in his bedroom door, suddenly jolted upright. His heart skipped a beat at the sound of her name, a name woven into the warmest corners of his childhood, now spoken aloud in the marble hall of a house that had never quite felt like home. He bolted from his room like a shot. "Aunt Susie," he cried, his voice cracking somewhere between a laugh and a sob. His footsteps thundered down the grand staircase, echoing through the corridor like a drum roll announcing something sacred. For a split second, all the pain, pressure, and secrets of his double life evaporated, swept away by the sight of her. Susan's head turned at the sound of his voice, and in that instant her entire face lit up. The stylish composure she wore like a second skin softened completely as she dropped the suitcase handle and opened her arms wide without a second thought. Nick! It wasn't just a greeting. It was a release, a balm, a beacon, a homecoming. Nick didn't hesitate. He launched himself forward, bounding down the final few steps, nearly stumbling in his haste. His arms wrapped around her tightly, clutching the only person left from the world before the Black Death, before the mission, before the suit and the pain and the pretending. Susan embraced him with the full force of someone who had never once stopped loving him, not for a single second. She held him like a boy who had once fit into her lap, who used to draw on her designer handbags with marker pens as a toddler, and who had fallen asleep against her shoulder on private outings. Her arms were strong and grounding. Her perfume, warm citrus, peach blossom, and something unmistakably hers, brought a sting to Nick's eyes. He squeezed her tighter, burying his face against her shoulder. I can't believe you're back, Aunt Susie," he whispered, the words trembling as they left his mouth. "It's been over 5 years. I've missed you so much." "I've missed you too, darling," Susan murmured, her voice now stripped of its theatrical lilt, revealing something softer, rawer beneath. She gently stroked the back of his hair, her gloved hand trembling ever so slightly. After a long moment, she stepped back, though her hands stayed on his shoulders. Her vibrant green eyes, once playful and glittering, now held a fierce protectiveness. She studied his face, his sharper jawline, the faint shadows beneath his eyes, and the bruises he hadn't entirely concealed. He'd grown so much, but she could still see the boy he had been. "William told me about David and Sarah," she said, her voice gentling. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I know how much they meant to you." The names struck like arrows, sharp and sudden. Nick's breath caught, a lump rising painfully in his throat. Even now the grief lived just beneath the surface, constant quiet, coiled like a serpent. He didn't speak, but Susan didn't need him to. She saw it, she felt it. "But I'm here now," she continued, her grip on his shoulders tightening slightly. "I'm your legal guardian, Nicholas Andrew Adams." Her voice was steady. There was no room for doubt. "I'll take care of you. I promise. I'm not going anywhere. You've got me, Nick. You're not alone." Those last words sank into him like a warm current. His lower lip trembled despite himself. In her eyes there was no pity, only love, only understanding, only the kind of unwavering loyalty that couldn't be earned. It had always been there, waiting to be reclaimed. He didn't know how long they stood like that, frozen in the marble foyer, wrapped in the comfort of something that once seemed impossible to return to. But the weight on his chest began to lift, if only a little. The mansion hadn't changed. The world hadn't changed. But he had, because she was back. Connor, James, and Anne made their way into the main hall, the atmosphere buzzing with curiosity and anticipation. "Well, looks like we've got another guest living in the mansion," James remarked, brushing the last of his sandwich crumbs off his jumper as he spoke. "I'm not complaining," Anne replied brightly. "This place feels more alive with more people around." Her gaze drifted towards Nick, who was still wrapped in a tight embrace with Susan. Leaning slightly closer to Connor, she whispered, "Who is she, Connor?" "That's Susan Pankhurst," he replied, nodding in their direction. "She's been like family to Nick for years." Anne frowned slightly, replaying Nick's joyful shout of Aunt Susie in her mind. "So, she's not actually related to him?" Connor shook his head. "No, not by blood, but Nick's always called her that. She was a constant presence when he was little. He'd light up whenever she visited. She used to tell him stories about her travels all over the world, and she's the one who taught him that fighting style he uses. And now she's his legal guardian, so she's here for the long haul." "Oh, that makes sense," Anne said, a soft smile spreading across her face. "It's wonderful that he has someone like her. After everything he's been through, he deserves someone in his corner." "Yeah?" Connor agreed, his tone thoughtful as he watched Nick and Susan. "He needs someone who'll actually be there for him. His uncle might mean well, but work always comes first for him." After Susan released Nick from their embrace, a familiar voice echoed through the hall as she wheeled her suitcase into the mansion. "Welcome back, Miss Pankhurst," Apollo greeted, his tone warm, yet characteristically formal. "Good to see you too, Apollo," she replied, her green eyes sparkling with affection. Then, turning her attention to May, she added, "And you must be the new housekeeper and home tutor. No need to introduce yourself. William's already filled me in on everyone staying here with Nick. You're Mei Shang." Recognizing Susan as Nick's new guardian, May offered a respectful Chinese bow. "I am. It is an honor to meet you, Miss Pankhurst." To May's surprise, Susan closed the distance and embraced her in a warm, welcoming hug. "Please, call me Susan. No need for formalities, especially under the same roof." The warmth of the gesture caught May off guard, but she found herself smiling, touched by the woman's sincerity. Susan then turned to Anne, pulling her in without hesitation. "And you must be Anne, your mum's daughter, through and through. You've got her eyes, and I bet her sharp mind too." "Thank you," Anne replied, a little startled by Susan's sudden embrace, but unable to hide her smile. Next, Susan moved towards James, extending her fist with a playful grin. "And this must be James Hunter, May's stepson. Put it there, champ." James bumped fists with her, grinning. "It's cool you'll be staying here, sirs. You seem like a lovely, chill adult." Susan chuckled. "Chill? I like that." Finally, her gaze landed on Connor. Her smile widened as she pulled him in for a tight hug. "Connor, I'm so glad you're here with Nick. That's what real friends do. Show up when it matters. As she released him, her tone softened. I heard about what happened on the train yesterday. You poor things. I'm so glad you're safe. Thank you, Susan, Connor replied earnestly. Yeah, I was scared, but Zeus and Captain Rhodes had our backs. No terrorist attack is going to stop me from being there for Nick. Susan gave him an approving nod, her expression proud. Strong and loyal, those are rare qualities. Keep them close, and you'll go far. Nick spoke up, a surge of happiness bubbling in his chest, now that Susan was back in his life. Well, now that introductions are out of the way, would you like me to show you to your room, Aunt Susie? Thank you, Nick, she replied warmly, her smile softening. But there's no need. I know my way around. This old place hasn't changed much. Besides, I already have a room waiting for me, don't I, Apollo? Correct, Ms. Pankhurst, Apollo confirmed. Your personal quarters have remained locked and untouched since your last visit. They are now being prepared. May stepped in before the conversation could carry on, redirecting the attention. Nick, break's nearly over. You and the others need to be in the living room. We'll be starting the history lesson shortly. Susan raised a curious brow. History, is it? And what are we teaching them today? May smiled, her enthusiasm clearly showing. We'll be reading excerpts from The Exiled Prince, the Emperor's Memoirs. Susan gave an approving nod. That's a fantastic read. Heavy in places, but full of important lessons. Well then, I'd best get unpacked. She turned to Nick, her eyes gleaming. Once your lesson's done, come find me. We've got a lot to catch up on. I will, Aunt Susie, Nick promised, the anticipation in his voice barely contained. Right, everyone, back to class, May called, gently ushering her students out of the hall and towards the living room. As they filed out, Nick lingered for a moment, watching Susan ascend the stairs, her red suitcase trailing behind her. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed her until now. Just seeing her again felt like a weight lifted from his shoulders. Come on, Nick. Don't keep us waiting. May's voice rang out from the living room, breaking his reverie. Right. Sorry, Nick called back, snapping out of his daze. He jogged back into the living room and took his place with renewed focus. Though the lesson was beginning, Nick's thoughts drifted ahead to the conversation waiting for him upstairs. The day's trials suddenly felt lighter, anchored by the promise of old memories and the warmth of someone who had always been family.